Mexico in the 1830s was a nation grappling with its newfound independence. The streets of Mexico City were bustling with activity, yet beneath the surface the country was struggling to define its identity and future. Just a decade removed from Spanish rule, the young republic was plagued by political instability and economic woes. The euphoria of independence celebrations had faded, giving way to the harsh realities of self-governance. Internal divisions ran deep, with power struggles erupting between centralists who favored a strong central government and federalists who advocated for greater regional autonomy. These ideological battles often turned violent, leading to regional conflicts that further weakened the nation. This internal strife created a volatile environment ripe for exploitation by foreign powers. Foreign diplomats watched closely, sensing opportunities to extend their influence over the struggling nation. Adding fuel to the fire, Mexico's economy was struggling to find its footing after years of war and upheaval. The marketplaces, once vibrant, now reflected the economic distress that gripped the country. The government was heavily indebted, both domestically and to foreign creditors, including France. The burden of debt weighed heavily on the fledgling republic, limiting its ability to invest in infrastructure and public services. This toxic mix of political instability, economic weakness, and foreign debt set the stage for a seemingly insignificant incident to spiral into an international conflict. The tension in the air was palpable as the nation teetered on the brink of chaos. France, under the reign of King Louis-Philippe, was eager to assert its influence on the world stage. The French monarchy, seeking to expand its reach, saw Mexico's vulnerability as an opportunity. The French monarchy saw an opportunity in Mexico's vulnerability, hoping to leverage its claims for debt repayment into greater economic and political control. French diplomats in Mexico were instructed to press their advantage, seeking to turn financial leverage into political influence. French citizens living in Mexico, many of whom were merchants and businessmen, frequently complained to their government about losses suffered during Mexico's turbulent political climate. These merchants, who had invested heavily in the Mexican economy, felt the brunt of the instability. These complaints, often exaggerated, fueled French resentment and provided a convenient pretext for intervention. The French government, eager to protect its citizens and interests, began to consider more aggressive measures. The stage was set for a clash of civilizations, a conflict that would be remembered not for its grand battles or strategic brilliance, but for its rather peculiar name, the Pastry War. This conflict, sparked by the grievances of French pastry chefs, would become a symbol of the complex interplay between domestic turmoil and international ambition. The incident that ignited the conflict and ultimately lent it its curious name occurred in 1838 at a pastry shop in Mexico City. This seemingly trivial event would set off a chain reaction that reverberated far beyond the walls of the small shop. While the exact details remain shrouded in historical debate, the general consensus is that a French pastry chef named Remontel owned a popular establishment frequented by Mexican officials and foreign dignitaries alike. His pastries were renowned, and his shop was a social hub where the elite mingled. One fateful day, a group of Mexican officers, allegedly intoxicated and unruly, caused a disturbance at Remontel's shop. They were said to have been celebrating a recent military victory, their spirits high and their behavior unchecked. Accounts vary as to the extent of the damage, with some claiming pastries were devoured without payment, while others described furniture being overturned and the shop left in disarray. The chaos left Remontel's once pristine shop in ruins. Remontel, outraged by the incident and the perceived lack of justice, took his grievance to the French ambassador, Baron de Fodis. He felt that the local authorities had failed to protect his business and sought redress from his homeland. De Fodis, already eager to find a pretext for asserting French claims against the Mexican government, seized upon Remontel's complaint. He saw an opportunity to press for broader French interests in the region and presented the Mexican government with a list of demands for compensation, not only for Remontel's losses, but also for other alleged injustices suffered by French citizens in Mexico. The list was extensive and included various grievances that had accumulated over time. The demanded sum, 600,000 pesos, was exorbitantly high, especially considering the relatively minor nature of the pastry shop incident. This amount was far beyond what the Mexican government could afford, given its financial struggles. The Mexican government, already grappling with internal strife and a depleted treasury, balked at Defordes' demands. They viewed the French claims as exaggerated and opportunistic, an attempt to exploit Mexico's vulnerability for their own gain. Negotiations between the two nations reached an impasse, with neither side willing to back down. The tension was palpable and the stakes were high. The situation escalated rapidly, fueled by national pride and a potent cocktail of diplomatic blunders. Both nations were unwilling to appear weak, and the conflict seemed inevitable. As the diplomatic standoff continued, the French government decided to take more drastic measures. They sent a naval fleet to the Mexican coast, a show of force intended to pressure Mexico into compliance. The Mexican government, feeling cornered and outraged by the French aggression, began to prepare for a potential military confrontation. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and the prospect of war loomed large. The conflict that began over a seemingly trivial incident in a pastry shop had now escalated into a full-blown international crisis. The spark that ignited the conflict was small, but the flames it fanned were fierce and far-reaching. As the two nations stood on the brink of war, the world watched with bated breath. The events that followed would shape the course of history and leave a lasting impact on both countries. The situation escalated rapidly, fueled by national pride and a potent cocktail of diplomatic blunders. The stage was set for a conflict that would be remembered for generations to come. The diplomatic standoff between France and Mexico quickly deteriorated into a war of words. What began as a series of tense negotiations soon escalated into a full-blown diplomatic crisis, with both sides refusing to back down. Defordes, emboldened by his government's unwavering support, issued an ultimatum to the Mexican government: pay the exorbitant sum demanded or face the dire consequences. This ultimatum was not just a demand for money, it was a challenge to Mexico's sovereignty and a test of its resolve. The Mexican government, unwilling to be bullied by a foreign power, refused to yield to French pressure. They saw this as a matter of national pride and dignity, and they were determined to stand their ground no matter the cost. They viewed France's actions as an infringement upon their sovereignty and a blatant attempt to undermine their hard-won independence. The Mexican leaders knew that giving in would set a dangerous precedent, one that could invite further foreign intervention. Nationalist sentiment ran high in Mexico, with citizens rallying behind their government's defiance. Public gatherings and rallies became common as ordinary Mexicans expressed their support for the government's stance and their readiness to defend their nation. In response to Mexico's refusal, France dispatched a formidable naval squadron to the Gulf of Mexico in early 1838. This move was intended to show France's military might and to coerce Mexico into compliance. The French fleet, under the command of Rear Admiral Charles Baudin, established a blockade of Mexico's major ports, crippling its already struggling economy. The blockade was a strategic move aimed at cutting off Mexico's trade and resources. The blockade was a clear show of force intended to pressure the Mexican government into submission. French warships patrolled the waters, ensuring that no goods could enter or leave the Mexican ports. However, instead of intimidating the Mexicans, the blockade only served to strengthen their resolve. The sight of foreign warships off their coast galvanized the Mexican people, who were more determined than ever to resist. Anti-French sentiment reached fever pitch, with calls for resistance echoing throughout the nation. The Mexican press and public figures rallied the people, urging them to stand firm against the foreign aggressors. As tensions reached a boiling point, both sides prepared for the possibility of armed conflict. The Mexican government began to mobilize its forces, while the French military strategized their next moves. Mexico, despite its internal divisions, mobilized its meager military forces, determined to defend their homeland from foreign aggression. Soldiers were called to arms, and the nation braced itself for the impending conflict. France, confident in its military superiority, saw the conflict as an opportunity to teach Mexico a lesson and assert its dominance in the region. French commanders believed that a swift and decisive victory would not only secure their demands, but also reinforce France's position as a global power. The Pastry War, as it came to be known, officially began in November 1838 when the French bombarded the fortress of San Juan de Ulua, which guarded the port of Veracruz. The French Navy, equipped with superior firepower and technology, easily overwhelmed the outdated Mexican defenses. The bombardment of Veracruz marked the beginning of a one-sided conflict, with France's military might far exceeding Mexico's capabilities. Despite their disadvantage, Mexican forces, led by General Antonio López de Santa Anna, put up a spirited defense. Santa Anna, a charismatic and controversial figure in Mexican history, had a knack for rallying his troops and inspiring resistance. However, his tactical acumen and military judgment were often called into question, and the Pastry War would prove to be no different. The French, under the command of General Charles Latreille, Comte de Lorence, landed troops near Veracruz and quickly gained control of the city. Mexican forces, outnumbered and outgunned, were forced to retreat. The fall of Veracruz, a key port city and strategic asset, was a significant blow to Mexican morale and demonstrated the vast disparity in military power between the two nations.